We've been looking at a series called Down to Earth, and today is the final part of that series of a God who is down to earth and a God who comes to earth. It's the old story, really, and it's brilliant. I wonder what your head's like this morning. I wonder what your brain's like. And I wonder why your brain might be like that. There's any number of demands on our thought, our time, and our efforts at this season. And we get pulled in so many different directions. And so what I want to do today is just essentially go back to the old story and just spend a moment or two looking at it to ask ourselves, how do we make sense of Christmas in the world in which we live? Someone has said, once again, we turn, at this time of year, we turn from the observation, what is the world coming to celebrate who has come to the world. It's true that at this time of year, when tragedies happen, either personally or nationally or internationally, it seems worse. Because it's the time of year. And you'll have experienced some of that yourselves. We're going to listen to the story read. We've been spending a lot of our time circling around Luke's gospel, and for the final time before Christmas, Claire's going to come and read from Luke chapter 2.
The birth of Jesus. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger, because there was no guest room available for them.
Thanks, Claire. That's great. When Luke begins to tell us the story of the birth of Jesus, actually, one chapter before, when he's telling the story of the birth of John the Baptist, he introduces you as a reader, me as a reader, to three historic characters. So when he's telling the story about John the Baptist, it's in the days when Herod was king. And as Claire just read, in those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree. And then in brackets tells us that's when Quirinius was governor of Syria. So, who are these people? Well, here they are. There's King Herod, who lived from 73 BC to 4 AD. It's kind of like almost died by the time Jesus was arriving, so he's at the end of his life and his reign. Of those three, King Herod is the least important. He has the least power because he was a puppet king put in place by the Romans to oversee that area. But what Herod, he wasn't a nice man, he wasn't a good man, but he was brilliant at building stuff. And under his auspices, huge temples and walls and cities have been built. But he's the least important. The next one is Quirinius. Now, he was the governor of Syria, and he lived from 45 BC to 21 AD. Of the three, we know most about Quirinius. He's in loads of letters and literature at that time. There's lots of stuff outside of the Bible that talks about Quirinius. He's the governor. He's put in place by the Romans to oversee how that is run over a whole region. And then there's Caesar Augustus, who lived from 63 BC to 14 AD. He's the emperor. He's known as the savior of the world. That's the title. And when he dies, they announce that he has become a god. This is Caesar Augustus. So they go in order of significance, really, from Herod to Quirinius to Caesar Augustus. And Luke takes time to tell us that's when Jesus was born. The other thing Luke's going to tell you is that people are not happy. They're really not happy. In the book of Acts, which of course Luke wrote as well, there's a moment in the book of Acts where he writes about a man called Gamaliel, who was one of the Jewish leaders of the time, reflecting on what it's been like around here. Well, one of the things that happens is when you have unpopular people who are leading a country, unpopular people who are ruling, you get people who want to rebel. And Gamaliel said, some time ago, Theudas appeared and claiming to be somebody. And about 400 men rallied to him. He was killed. All his followers were dispersed. It all came to nothing. And after him, Judas the Galilean appeared in the days of the census. That's kind of interesting, is it not? And led a band of people in revolt. He too was killed, and all his followers were scattered. What Gamaliel was saying, so don't worry about these early followers of Jesus. It'll all die out. It'll become nothing. Don't worry about it. But can you see how it felt in those days when Herod was king and Caesar Augustus was the emperor and Quirinius was the governor? How do you get free? That's how it felt. It was a time of discontent. It was an age of uncertainty. It was a time when people were deeply, deeply unhappy. It's a time when people were really conscious of those in power. This Christmas, there's lots of reasons for concern. Where you look globally, if you look at America, there's reasons for concern. If you look at Russia, there's reasons for concern. If you look to China, there's reasons for concern. And if you look at the last one is Elon Musk. He's just there as a placeholder for three major people who oversee all of the technocratic world of computing, internet, the future. Some of these men threaten peace. Some of these men cause us to be concerned. Our lives can feel dominated by them. We're kind of buffered. We're distant. And some of you might go, well, actually, I do get concerned when I watch the news, but to be honest, I can turn it off. It struck me when Irina was talking about Romania. There's two things to note with Irina just a moment ago is you have a woman who's Ukrainian speaking about Romania. And in that area of Europe, of course, things are not good. Luke, when he tells the story, this is the bit that Claire didn't read. I didn't ask her to read it. But it's the bit that comes next. There were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. And the angel of the Lord appeared to them. The glory of the Lord shone up around them. They were terrified, but the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. you will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger. The bit in red is really the bit that is what I want to highlight. The message came to the shepherds, there's a new king being born. And the angel said, I want you to go and witness it. And you will find this baby in a manger. Now we know what mangers look like, don't we? Yeah? Okay. They look like that. They're not made of wood. They're not in a stable. They were made out of stone. Wood was too expensive for mangers. You don't use things that you haven't got much of, but you do use stone, and mangers were made of stone. And the mangers were part of the house where animals were brought in at night. And there would be a flat area where people would be, and then there was an upstairs room where you would sleep, and then some houses would have a guest room. And Jesus was put in a manger because there was no room for him or them in the guest room. It's the same word that's used when they go and prepare the meal, the Last Supper, upper room. It's the same word. It's the same word. Now, I know that for some of you, this is like telling... I did an assembly a few weeks ago, and the last thing Maggie said as I left the house was, please don't tell them there's no Santa. And I know that in a sense saying there's no stable, there's no innkeeper, there's no wooden manger is like, what? But it's true. Which is why every now and again we go back to the text and say, let's look again at what Luke's actually telling us, rather than all the stuff that we've created. We've created a wonderful story. And goodness knows, those of you that are teachers, particularly with younger children, how on earth you'd have been able to do it without an innkeeper going, no, you can't come in here. But it's probably not the story that Luke's telling us. Someone said this: God became man, took on flesh. The Creator became a creature. The one who hung the stars lay helpless in a manger. The one who we teach our children is so big, so strong, so mighty, became so weak, tiny, so weak, and so powerless. The King of the angels was made a little lower than the angels. The Creator of time entered time. The one whose everlasting arms are underneath his people lay vulnerable in his mother's arms. It's quite something, isn't it? I'll just read it one more time, simply to give you time to get it. God became man and took on flesh. The Creator became a creature. The one who hung the stars lay helpless in a manger. The one who we teach our children is so big, so strong, and so mighty, became so tiny, so weak, and so powerless. The King of the angels was made a little lower than the angels. The Creator of time entered time. The one whose everlasting arms are underneath his people lay vulnerable in his mother's arms. In a world that was and is uneasy and uncertain, we hear two different things. We hear the angels saying to the shepherds, a new king has been born. And then we hear the truth of this incarnation, that God becomes so very small. And we know the rest of the story, that Jesus, of course, grew and became a man and was crucified. The most, in sort of like the worst sort of death to happen. And then rose again. But it's easy at Christmas, isn't it, to do two things. And I think there's two temptations that we have when we look at the news, and as they had at the first. The two temptations is this. It's easy to think, well, Jesus is the Lord of my life. That Jesus is the Lord of our church, and it's here. And it's my faith, and it's very personal, and of course it is, and it's very much about giving me what I need in life, and I think that's true, but it's easy to sort of say, but he's not really the king of the world, except in some sort of general sense, but he is the king of my life, because otherwise, how do you make sense of the news? If Jesus is king, surely things would look different. That's one temptation. The other temptation the church has had for 2,000 years is this. If that's how you get things done around here, then let's go for power. And the church, at times, has tried to do it through power. We'll invade, we'll fight back, we'll make people become Christians. And both those temptations, I think, are temptations from the enemy. I think both of them are not the gospel. I think there's a bigger story. And when I was thinking about this, I wanted to answer my own question, really. If Jesus is king, wouldn't it look different? I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm the only person in the room who ever's asked that question. I'm kind of hoping not, but, it might just be therapy. Well, let me start with the manger again. Because Luke brackets the gospel with 2 stone places where Jesus laid. One's a manger and one's a tomb that's been hacked out of a rock. In the manger, Jesus is put in swaddling bands. In the tomb, he's been put with linen cloths all around him. And when he rises from the dead, the linen cloths are left behind. Luke begins with 1 stone manger and 1 stone tomb that cannot hold the king of the world. The manger is almost too small for God. The tomb is too weak to hold him. That's the gospel. So when we only stay with Christmas, it's not enough, because actually you've got 2 manger, tomb. But how does God get things done? If God is king, how does his kingship work? And I want to say 2 things. Firstly, the way that Luke tells a story is in the book of Acts. What God does is he takes his people and he sends them out to the whole world, and they preach the good news of Jesus. They tell anybody and everybody, whether they're Jew or Gentile, whether they're from what we would call Turkey or Israel or Italy, wherever it might be, wherever they went, they told people about Jesus. That's how the gospel outlived the Roman Empire. It's remarkable. That's how God does it. He sends people to people that are not known by them, and they make friends with them, and they explain to them, Jesus is the only hope for your world. It's one of the ways that God and his kingship are established on the earth. So if the world is this rebellious place, how does God get rebels to bow the knee? Well, he sends people like you and me. We need more people to go to unreached places in England and around the world to tell people there's a new king in town. We need more missionaries. We need more pastors. We need more churches. And for some of you, that will be the call on your life. That will be what God asks for you. Lord, here I am. I don't know what that will mean, maybe, but I will serve you that way. And I will go where you send me, and I won't stay in the easy place. I'll just go. And you will be part of the way that God's kingship is established in this generation and the next. And if you know God's asking of that of you, you need to say yes, even though it's frightening and you're not sure how it's going to work out. It's not everybody, but it'll be some of you. And it begins with a yes. But what if you're not sent to the ends of the earth? What are we called to do to demonstrate the kingship of Jesus? Well, in Matthew's gospel, they use a different image. Jesus said to his disciples, "You're the salt of the earth. You're the light of the world." Where you already are, in your families, salt, light. In your families, salt and light. In your workplace, salt and light. And in so doing, we declare the lordship of Jesus and we demonstrate what it means to be his followers. And so the kingship of Jesus is established. And then when I was preparing, I'm nearly done, but when I was preparing, I was thinking, in my lifetime, I've seen some remarkable things happen because of the salt and light of people. Now I'm going to talk about big things, and the danger is we can end up thinking only the big things matter. I hope you know I don't believe that. But please be encouraged by the big things. You may not know the guy on the corner, in fact the only guy on that slide, whose name was Oscar Romero. He was a church leader in Latin America. And he stood for the persecuted church and the poor in Latin America because of his faith, and he was martyred. But in so doing, what happened in Latin America, in part, was a revival. Because one man said, "I will not choose to save my life. I will choose to stand up against the powers and principalities." Tear Fund was established by Christians who said it's not enough when we look around the world to see people who die because they don't get clean water, for example. Christians did that. Christians who were part of World Vision doing something very similar. Christians who were at the birth of the United, the thing in the middle you may not be able to see is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. People with Christian heritage wrote that for the world because it's Christianity that says people have dignity, people have value, individuals are made in the image of God. Our Christian faith stands at the heart of the things that we think are most significant of democracy, of value of human life, of defending life. And it's complicated sometimes, but actually it's Christians who said in 1948, after the Holocaust, it cannot happen again, and as such, we will write a universal declaration of human rights, regardless of whether you're Jew, Gypsy, JW. You will not go to the gas chamber again. It was Christians who did that, because they said, actually, this is part of what it means to follow Jesus, and out of that came amnesty. Who was involved in amnesty at the beginning? For those who were being persecuted and tortured, Christians set it up. And in the East, in Poland and in some of the old communist countries at the time, who were standing with minors, with the ordinary people? It was the church that stood with solidarity and said, actually, it's not right that people are oppressed like this. How did the wall come down in communist days? It was the praying people of God in Germany who brought the wall down. It was the Christians in Romania who went and started singing on Christmas Eve. How many years ago now? Nearly 20 years ago. That God is good and that the wall comes down. Christians have done this because they said Jesus is king. One more slide. You'll know some of these people. The guy on there, the old guy with his finger to his cheek, you probably may not know. His name is Father Alec Reid. He was the primary mover behind the peace process in Belfast. He was the one doing the shuttling between the politicians and Sinn Féin because they trusted him because he's a Catholic priest. He put his own life in danger time and time again for peace in Northern Ireland. And as someone who's married to someone from Belfast, this matters a lot. Desmond Tutu in South Africa. Some of us are old enough to remember thinking, I don't know how South Africa will ever be changed. It was Desmond Tutu and the church who had the vision for a new society. But more than that, said, if there's going to be freedom from the past, we need truth and reconciliation. It's not enough just to have regime change. We need people to be able to tell the truth about what's happened to them and to be reconciled with those who did it to them. Only the gospel can do that. Martin Luther King, I don't really need to talk about. The guy at the bottom with the telephone, that's a telephone for those of you that were born in this century, was a man called Chad Vara. He was a vicar. He was a vicar in London. And he couldn't cope with the fact that so many people were committing suicide. So he started the Samaritans. People who would listen to those who were desperate. The woman next to him, Cicely Saunders, a Christian, who said it's not right that when you're dying, with respect to those of you that work in hospitals, that you're just confined to a ward. We will give you the dignity of hospice care. These people are national, international figures. But this is how God rules. My 60 years have been remarkable, in large part because of God's people. Now, we're not on the stage like this, but in our place, we get the chance to do the same. Salt and light, whether you're teaching students, whether you're helping with pupils, whatever you might be doing, working in warehouses. It's people who say yes. Last thing. When you say yes to God, whether it causes you to go to the ends of the earth, or whether it causes you to determine that in the warehouse where I'm working right now, I will be salt and light, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. There were two people in the Christmas story for whom saying yes to God and being allowed to be used by God made it difficult. There was a census. And the census meant that Joseph had to go back to his family roots. He took Mary with him. I think it's probably unlikely that Mary needed to go. Women didn't have rights in those days. I think it was the kindness of Joseph that took Mary with him. And when they were there, this baby, this king was born to them, and everybody overlooked it, except some angels. Except some shepherds, and except an old man and an old woman who'd been praying all their lives that the king would come. And Simeon and Anna spoke with Mary and Joseph and said, "This is the one we've been waiting for." So this Christmas, I think what I wanted to do with this little talk was to try and stop us making Jesus too small. I think what I wanted to do was to stop us getting trapped in the traditional Christmas story. I think what I wanted to do was persuade you that we have lived through miraculous days because of God's people. And there's more to come. But it starts with people who say yes. One last thought. When Mary was met by an angel at 9 months before Jesus was born, and she was told, "You're going to have a child," and she kind of argued with the angel a little bit and said, "That's not going to be possible, is it?" And the angel said, "You just leave the rest to me. All I need for you, Mary, is for you to say yes." That first yes led to a whole number of other moments where she had to say yes. And I suspect what happens for the kingship of God in our lives and through our lives is this. Some of us said yes to Jesus. Some of you said yes to Jesus when you were a child, decades ago. But there's moments in your life where you have to say yes again. It's not enough just to go, "Yeah, I said yes, I'm a Christian, I'll go to heaven." There are moments where you're back again. And it's at this stage of life now, or your stage of life, and your circumstance. Are you willing to say yes? It might be the beginning, where you're going, "I've been baptized, I'm up for anything, God. Take my life and use it." Or it might be your baptism is so far in the past that it's barely able to remember where you were. But it's the moment where you say yes again. And so God takes us and uses our lives in uncertain days for his glory.